Welcome to Glove Talk, your weekly news in boxing. New episodes every Sunday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. With that said, let's talk boxing. So boxing is back finally, and we actually have some fights to talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the actual fights that happened this week on Tuesday and Thursday, and then we're going to end up just kind of going through the news from the lightest weight class to the heaviest weight class. So with that said, let's get into it. With the Shakur Stevenson and Felix Caraballo undercard, there's just not a lot to talk about. To be honest with you, this might be one of the worst fight cards I have seen in a very long time. I mean, it was abysmal. Initially, when I made this video and I was recording for this week, I did this whole video and I talked all about each and every fight on the undercard, and then I just noticed when I was editing it that it was 10 minutes of me telling you how terrible the fights were. And I just thought, you know what, instead of doing that and wasting your time and my time editing something that clearly I'm just going to tell you not to watch the fight, let's just skip all of that and get to the things that are actually important when it came to this undercard. And that, quite frankly, is just one person in particular, and that is Jared Big Baby Anderson. So if you don't know anything about Jared Big Baby Anderson, he is 6'4", 6'5"-ish, around 236. And that's a pretty good size heavyweight. That's pretty average to say the least. But what's interesting about him, he's 20 years old. Yeah, he's 20 years old and he's already 6'4", 236, and he has a great build on him. So that was kind of interesting for me. Like, hey, this could be a great prospect coming through. And then I saw him fight and I liked what I saw. I really liked what I saw. He threw basically every single punch under the sun at Johnny Langston. I mean, he literally threw everything I can think of. And what was nice is that you saw him do a lot of body work and then come up and work the head and everything like that, rather than just focusing on headshots and trying to get the guy out of there. Now, you could tell he was working at a very fast pace. He was definitely trying to get like a first early stoppage, first round knockout. Definitely was still going for that. But his punch combinations that he was throwing was much better than what a lot of prospects that do try to get the knockout early do, and how they look. The other thing I noticed is that he moves well for a very large guy. You know, guys that are usually that big sometimes can look a little bit robotic, especially if they're trying to bulk up too much. You can see them be a little bit more robotic, whereas Jared Big Baby Anderson moved more athletic. He definitely looked more comfortable, and that tells me that he just naturally is that big. And what it really reminded me a lot of is more of the build of a very, promising prospect that's across the pond right now, and that's Daniel Dubois. I mean, he's reminds me a lot of Daniel Dubois in a lot of ways. Besides just the physique and everything like that, he just looks like he can have more of that natural ability and athleticism to him, a little bit less, like I said, robotic because of it. And I think what's interesting is that, Daniel Dubois is a larger individual in comparison to Jared Anderson. He's a little bit bigger, but at the same time, Jared Anderson's 2 years younger. So we could really see both these guys be amazing heavyweights in a couple years from now, especially once you get the big three out of the way, once we stop seeing AJ, Fury, and Wilder. I mean, they're all in their early 30s to mid 30s at this point. So, how many years do we have until they're eventually done fighting? Probably not many. So these guys could be the next up and coming big heavyweights. I know I'm really big on Daniel Dubois. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's going to do pretty well against Joe Joyce. If that fight ever actually happens, it sounds like they might actually have some interim fights. Hope not, but we'll see what happens. So you have size, you have athleticism, and the only thing that the last ingredient that he really needs is that he needs that man strength. Like I said, he's 20 years old. He has a couple years. Once he starts really hitting his stride in terms of athleticism and everything like that, and that power starts coming in, as they say, that man strength comes in. I mean, he's going to be knocking out guys left and right. He did end up getting the stoppage in the third round, which I think was a good stoppage. I mean, to be honest, Johnny Langston just didn't have much and was just getting pummeled at a certain point. So I think it was a really smart stoppage. Keep an eye out for this kid. I bet you he will be something going forward. And as long as he keeps doing what he's doing right now, he could be very promising. And I'm not going to lie, he's also a Patriots fan, so I also am a fan of that. Now let's talk about the Stevenson and Caraballo fight, the main event. Honestly, this was another lopsided fight. There really isn't much to talk about in terms of Caraballo. He was basically just there to get beat on by Stevenson. Stevenson just looked like leagues above Caraballo. It wasn't even close. But what was nice to see was, how does Stevenson look at 130? Because normally he fights at 126. He was at 130. He looked really good. He moved well. His defense was excellent. The only thing that was annoying the whole time is they kept on comparing him to Floyd Mayweather, and they just kept on talking it back and forth all the time, nonstop, pretty much every chance they got. So it's like, I get it, you know, they're both really great when it comes to defense, but let's not go that far yet. You know, I think that it's nice to make the comparison, but when you make the comparison every 10 minutes, it gets a little bit annoying. The other thing is, I really want to see Shakur Stevenson step up a little bit, an opponent. I know he's young. I'm usually not a big fan of pushing young fighters too hard too early, but he is at these weight classes that have a lot of really dangerous fighters. Love to see what he could do against someone that throws a little bit higher volume towards him too. I know he has great defense, and that's probably one of his biggest strengths as a fighter, but let's see what he does when he maybe gets bullied a little bit more. Someone like a Josh Warrington, who throws high volumes of punches, and it's going to hit him a little bit more. I'd like to see what happens and how he adjusts to that, you know, when his just defense isn't going to slip every single punch. The other thing that was interesting with this fight is that at one point Shakur Stevenson started shaking his hand quite a bit after he landed a punch. I'm guessing, I think it was his left hand, I'm guessing that he maybe hit the, you know, top of Caraballo's head or something like that and damaged his hand a little bit. Later on, it was said that there's no damage, there's no fractures or broken bones or anything like that. I'm guessing he just hit the top, but anytime you see a boxer kind of shake their hand out after throwing a punch, it's just never a good sign. You always worry that they broke their hand. What's nice about this is that since he had such a fairly easy fight, didn't take any damage. I think he got hit 14 times total on the compy box, which is nothing. They did say that he is looking to kind of get back in the ring again, maybe in a month or so. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of guys out there that really want to fight him. Gary Russell Jr. is also another name that's been thrown around a little bit. We'll see who he ends up fighting. I mean, I think that for him to be this superstar that he wants to be, he's definitely gonna have to step up eventually, but at the same time, he's a young kid. Pad his record a little bit more, make sure he keeps that confidence up, make sure he stays in the gym though. That's a big part. These young guys right now are getting paid fairly well, especially in boxing, and they're becoming stars, and they're getting outside the gym, and you know, they can get a little bit crazy. Shakur Stevenson's also had a little bit of issues outside of the gym, so let's make sure that he stays in the gym as much as possible, stays focused, and he has the right people around him, because this kid could be a star. He looks great. I was very happy with what I saw overall. You know, I wasn't overly impressed, but at the same time, he gave me exactly what I expected to see from him. He looked sharp, he looked in shape, and most of all, he just delivered really what he needed to do. Now we're moving to Thursday night, and that was Magdaleno versus Vicente. You know, the co-main event yet again was the best fight after all, and actually I think maybe the best fight of the entire night by far. What was weird about it is that they end up having the co-main first, and then they had two other kind of padded fights, and then they had the main event. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they did that because they were worried about, you know, keeping retention and viewers and stuff like that, because the last card was so weak, the undercard was so weak. Maybe people kind of tuned out a little bit and didn't get to see the main event. The co-main that was, like I said, I think the best fight of the night was Louis Cormier versus Adam Lopez, and they hyped up Adam Lopez a little bit, kind of talking about how well he did against Valdez and how he's this kind of kid that could be a really great fighter, or in the weight division, everything else. So they really kind of hyped him up a little bit, and you were kind of ready to see something kind of special maybe from him. And right off the bat, Cormier just absolutely did not back down. Maybe at first Lopez thought this was going to be an easy fight, but Cormier said, no, you're really going to have to work for this. And this turned into an absolute war. It was fantastic. You started seeing Cormier really come forward, high pressure, classic kind of Mexican style, with a lot of pressure, a lot of volume of punches, making sure to really smother Lopez, not let him kind of do the work that he wanted to do. You could just tell Lopez was getting frustrated and wasn't very happy with the situation. I think he expected Cormier to be a lot easier and just kind of, you know, willingly step down and let him kind of do his work. Cormier wasn't having any of that. So the first two rounds, rounds right off the bat. Poirier definitely won those rounds in my opinion. Then afterwards you started seeing Lopez make adjustments, which to me that's the sign of a really good boxer. When you start seeing he has a good corner, one thing that was nice, because there was no crowd, you could really hear, you know, both corners talking the entire time, and you could just hear Lopez's corner adamantly telling him to keep distance, use his jab. And once Adam Lopez started doing that, he really started to become effective. He started picking off Poirier. Poirier didn't have the best head movement. He was kind of coming in a straight line, and you could see Adam Lopez just peppering him from the outside. So then it started kind of, the whole fight started shifting in Lopez's favor. Poirier, you know, credit to him, is a tough fighter. He took a lot of punches, but he wasn't giving up. He was still kind of sticking to his game plan, kind of keeping it a little bit one-dimensional. But anytime he did get inside, he made Lopez pay for it. Lopez continued to try to outbox him, but then eventually you started seeing later on in the fight, because it was a 10-round fight, you started seeing around the maybe 7th or 8th round, Lopez really started to kind of gas out a little bit, and Poirier started really to take advantage of it. So now it's starting to kind of swing back again in favor of Poirier. Like I said, this was a war. This was a great fight. You get to see kind of the tale of two halves, and multiple kind of scenarios for each fighter to kind of fight in and fight out of. So it was great to see the kind of how Poirier just didn't give up, kept on kind of try to come inside, use that pressure, get that inside. Once he did get inside, he was effective. In the end, I had it 96-94 for Lopez, and that's basically what it ended up being. Two of the scorecards were 96-94, and then one of them had it as a tie, 95-95. So it was a great fight. Definitely go check it out on YouTube if you want to see just an absolute kind of tale of two halves, two different styles. One guy's kind of controlling the outside, one guy's controlling the inside. One's high pressure, one's using more of his skills and footwork to kind of manipulate the other one. It's just a really good fight. In my opinion, it was the best fight of the entire night. So the main event for this card was Jesse Magdaleno versus Yenifel Vicente, and quite honestly, I didn't know what to expect for this fight. You know, they hyped up obviously Magdaleno quite a bit, made him seem like he's going to be the next greatest thing. That's how they always are with these cards. But right off the bat, he looked good. He certainly looked levels above Vicente, and I believe he got a knockdown in the first round. So it was already, he was doing well on the cards. Then something happened, and it kind of made things a little bit crazy and a little bit weird at first. So what happened was Vicente hit Magdaleno low, really low actually, and Magdaleno, you know, knowingly kind of thought that the ref was going to kind of jump in and just take control of the situation, give him time to breathe. And so he put his hands down. It's partially instinctual, partially I think he thought it was such a egregious low blow that, you know, the ref was going to immediately jump in. But what happened was he drops his hands, and Vicente hit him just square and dropped him right to the canvas. So there was this weird moment where you don't know, is Magdaleno knocked out? How are they going to handle this? How many points are going to be deducted? Are there points going to be deducted? What's going to happen? Can they even continue the fight? So for this weird about 2 minutes, you can even tell that the announcers Timothy Bradley and Andre Ward just didn't know what to say, and kind of just kept on harping on the fact that it was a low blow. We all kind of didn't know what was going to happen really, and eventually Magdaleno did get up. They deducted 2 points from Vicente at this point, and the fight continued. But this is where the fight just got kind of crazy, because now Vicente is down 3 points, because remind you, the first round he had a knockdown, so now he's down 3 points on the card in a 10-round fight. I mean, that's just not gonna be easy to come back. So immediately Vicente just started throwing haymakers. Every single punch he was throwing was to try to knock out Magdaleno, and Magdaleno, instead of, you know, trying to box back really, he kind of just quite frankly shelled up for the rest of the fight, for most of the fight. And then at a certain point, Magdaleno did land a really nice counter that dropped Vicente down again. So now Vicente was really down on the cards and just kept on. It was just kind of a dirty boxing at that point. It just turned in this really ugly kind of crazy fight, because Vicente is just trying to knock out Magdaleno the entire time. Magdaleno is just trying to not be involved with it at all. It just was kind of nuts. It went from a really calm, very kind of cordial fight, kind of, you know, two guys kind of feeling each other out. Magdaleno's clearly looking like the better boxer, and then it just turns into kind of chaos. In the final round, you know, Vicente was down quite a bit, and he just hits Magdaleno low again, just squarely does it blatantly and right in front of the ref and everything like that. They take another point away. So now I'm thinking, well, why don't you just stop the fight at this point? Because he's clearly done it now multiple times. They don't stop the fight. They continue the fight, and then he does it again, and they DQ him, and that's how the fight ended. And funny enough, later they showed the scorecards, and because Magdaleno shelled up so much during this fight, some of the actual judges had it fairly close fight. It was a weird fight, I'm not gonna lie. It was a very bizarre outcome to this fight. I wouldn't recommend really going back and watching it. It wasn't a great thing to watch. It was a bizarre one. It was kind of just a very weird fight, and quite frankly, I'm glad that the co-mains were so strong, because the co-main really made up for the rest of the card. So with that said, now we're gonna go into the actual news. Like I said, like always, we're gonna go from the lightest weight class to the heaviest weight class, and we'll see what's going on right now. So the first story, there wasn't a ton of stuff going on this week in boxing, so I'm going to pull some older stories, stuff that probably didn't get really touched on by a lot of people, but I thought deserve a little bit of notoriety or some time. One of them being right off the bat that Donaire talking about how he's excited about the idea of fighting Rigondeaux at 118, having a rematch. Yes, please. Yes, I would like to see that fight. That would be an excellent rematch. They haven't fought in almost 7 years plus at this point, so I think this would be a really great rematch, especially because you've seen Rigondeaux kind of come back a little bit, kind of rejuvenate his career a little bit by moving down in weight after losing to Lomachenko, and now we just saw Donaire really come back and show everybody he's still got a little bit gas in the tank with his Inoue fight. So I think that'd be a great rematch. I certainly would love to see that fight. The other thing that's interesting about this is that they're both older. They're both around 40 years old, so I think that's kind of a great pairing right there. I think they're both kind of amazing boxers, Hall of Fame boxers, and it would just be really great to see what could happen between these two, especially now that they haven't fought each other in 7 years. They've both gone on their own kind of journey and path in the weight divisions and stuff like that, moving up and moving down. Let's see what happens here. This would be a great fight. I hope that they end up making this fight, but we'll see. Next up is the lightweight division, which is a very exciting division right now, and there's talk about having in basically late summer Devin Haney fight Luke Campbell. I would absolutely love this to happen. I really think that this fight needs to happen for Devin Haney. If you're going to be carrying probably the most prestigious belt around, you need to be fighting very serious contenders. I think Luke Campbell is the perfect opponent for someone like a Devin Haney. He's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit rangier, and if Devin Haney's talking about moving up in weight eventually, this is kind of the perfect dance partner to try it out on. We've seen, you know, Luke Campbell be beat. He can be beat, so Devin Haney does have a little bit of a roadmap in terms of how you could fight him and how you could go about doing it. Question really is, does Devin Haney want to take on someone that's, I would say, a significant upgrade compared to some of his other opponents? We'll see. I don't know if it's actually going to happen. So next, we're going to move up to welterweight. Spence talking basically about his 3-fight plan going forward. First being Danny Garcia, then Manny Pacquiao, then Terrence Crawford. To be honest, I kind of get this a little bit. Number one, I see Danny Garcia trying to be more of that kind of, I don't want to say it's his warm-up fight, because it's not really a warm-up fight. Danny Garcia is a very serious boxer and a really legitimate opponent. I see it more as Errol Spence basically showing everybody that he is ready and that he is back and that he's, you know, been in the gym and he's feeling fine, he's feeling good, feeling basically like how he did before the car accident. I see the Manny Pacquiao fight purely as a money fight for him, quite honestly. I mean, Manny Pacquiao basically is a guaranteed solid paycheck, so I understand that. And then maybe doing the Terrence Crawford fight. I would love to see the Terrence Crawford fight sooner rather than later. I know that Terrence Crawford is just not wanting to really do a deal with Errol Spence right now because he's worried about the idea of him beating Errol Spence and people kind of just blaming the car accident and him not really getting credit. We kind of talked about that a little bit in episode 3, and so I understand that, but at the same time, when are these guys going to actually fight? Because it's probably not going to happen this year. It might happen late next year, so now we're looking at it being late 2021 maybe. I don't know. Quite frankly, I just want to see Errol Spence fight Danny Garcia first, see how good he looks, see where he's really at. You know, is he back 100%, or is he looking a little bit like he's got some ring rust and he's working things out? Let's see what happens with the Danny Garcia fight first, and then let's go from there. Obviously, the Manny Pacquiao fight would be very interesting to see. Speaking of Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford saying that the Manny Pacquiao fight is good to go, and like in the sense that they're both under the same promotion and that Manny Pacquiao wants that fight. I don't know if Manny Pacquiao really wants to make that fight. I don't know if that's really something that he's interested in or not. He really hasn't expressed who he wants to fight fight next, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of talk about who he's fighting next. And that's why when stuff like that happens, when you don't hear a lot from a boxer like a Manny Pacquiao who they're going to fight next, you start getting weird little rumors like this one. Freddie Roach saying that Manny Pacquiao is going to fight Triple G. Basically, he's talking about getting his 9th weight division belt and title at that weight. Very interesting. Now, hear me out. I'm going to kind of tell both sides of it, what people are saying, and then kind of give you my thoughts. So there's one camp that immediately is like, oh, this would be a great fight. I want to see this. You know, Manny Pacquiao's taken on really large opponents in the past, especially like a Margarito when he took on Margarito. Margarito's actually taller than Triple G. Triple G's 5'10", Margarito's 5'11". So, you know, Manny Pacquiao's taken on large fighters. And then there's the other side of it where there's more the Triple G side fan base that's just like Triple G will just break Manny Pacquiao in half. He has zero chance. What's he even talking about going up to 160? He shouldn't even mention Triple G's name because he'll just crush Manny Pacquiao. So where I'm at when I first saw this, at first I thought that's kind of an interesting combo. That's kind of a neat pairing, so to speak, because you both have Triple G definitely looking mortal recently, and you have Manny Pacquiao looking superhuman with the way he's fighting at his age. And the thing is, yeah, that seems like it might be an interesting pair, but let's be honest about this, and this is something I think people really need to look at. Manny Pacquiao, when he first started fighting, fought at like 108 pounds. Manny Pacquiao beating at 147 is about as big as Manny Pacquiao is gonna be. Him fighting at, you know, 160 is just not really in the cards. Him fighting up anything north of 147 for Manny Pacquiao, quite honestly, is a stretch for him because he talks about walking around at 140. Manny Pacquiao is 5'5", 140 on a good day. So I don't see him fighting at 160 pounds. Can he bulk up and fight a little bit bigger? Sure, he can do that if he really wants to. Do I recommend him doing that against someone like a Triple G? No, not at all, especially considering someone like a Triple G has just dominated guys at 160. 160 is a very dangerous weight class. You're fighting guys that weigh in at 160, but that walk around at 180. Triple G's used to very large guys. And Manny Pacquiao, although he's used to kind of fighting a little bit bigger guys and he's handled them fairly decent, I don't see him handling a Triple G. I think it's a little bit ridiculous, and I think that people think that this fight's gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. I don't think Manny really wants to do this. I think Triple G would like entertain the idea, but I don't really see it happening. It is a fun idea though, and I think it was fun to talk about at least for a little bit. So moving on to middleweight, one thing that's been thrown around a little bit is that Canelo has a couple options, 5 or 6 options. It seems like him and Billy Joe Saunders are it's just not going to work out. I'm guessing due to contracts that Billy Joe Saunders wants. Canelo doesn't want anything to do with them because quite honestly, Canelo brings so much of the A-side fan base and just promotion for everything that I'm guessing that Saunders is asking too much. Maybe it's a tactic. I don't know. Now there's a lot of rumor behind Canelo fighting Caleb Plant, and honestly, I don't hate that fight. I think that's a very interesting fight. What I like about it is that if it's at 168, which I'm assuming it's going to be, then Canelo could get a legit belt at 168. You know, the one he got from Rocky Fielding is the champion, and there's the super champion, all that BS. So I like the idea of Canelo fighting at 168, fighting a Caleb Plant. I think that'd be nice. The one thing I did see that was ridiculous is that Caleb Plant being like, I control 168, that's my division. That's, you know, Canelo doesn't. It doesn't matter where Canelo fights, basically at what weight class he fights at. He pretty much controls boxing at this point. I don't think there's anyone really in boxing, maybe except for some of the heavyweights, that commands more attention and the biggest purses possible as Canelo. Canelo really has an incredible fan base and quite honestly has the numbers to basically trump anyone when it comes to contracts or what they want. You don't really have much of a bargaining chip against someone like a Canelo. Even if you have belts, you still don't have much of a bargaining chip because he pretty much comes to the table guaranteeing high numbers, great watch rate, good gates. He's always going to have a good gate, that's for sure. So with that, he's going to bring the money in, And unless you really bring something to the table that's special, which most people don't, I just don't see really Caleb Plant bringing much to the table for this. And he's not just the B-side, he's a far B-side compared to Canelo. The first major article I saw for heavyweight was Charles Martin telling AJ to drop the IBF belt and let him and Pulev fight. I don't hate this. It's not a terrible idea. I just, quite honestly, I'm not a big fan of Charles Martin. He's just not a very fun heavyweight to watch, to be honest with you. And I get what he's trying to do here. I think it's smart of him to do this because it's probably the easiest way for him to get a belt or to get a mandatory, to be honest with you. But it's not going to happen. I think everyone knows that Joshua and Fury is the main focus. They really don't want to lose belts if they don't have to. It just makes the whole kind of 2-fight deal that they just did that much better. Let's talk about the 2-fight deal and what this all kind of can be, should be, hopefully will be. So the 2-fight deal got done with Fury and AJ, and everybody was very excited about this idea. But the truth is that we're a long way away from this fight happening. So let's kind of break down a little bit what has to happen for this fight to actually happen. Both these fights to happen, actually. So number one, Fury has to beat Wilder. And I know people feel as though, you know, Fury in the first fight was kind of coming back, was a little bit rusty, you know, was lost all that weight and everything like that. Probably won the first fight. Safe to say, I think he won the first fight. Second fight, he just bullied the crap out of Wilder, and Wilder just did not look comfortable whatsoever in the ring against Tyson Fury. Now, that could be that Wilder took a punch to the equilibrium. His equilibrium, he just did not look right. He looked like he was falling all over the place. He didn't look like he had any kind of balance. And Fury just looked like a beast in comparison to him. So I don't know if that's the true deal, like if that's the new Tyson Fury now that he's adapted, lost the weight, been strength training, everything else, or if that was just what happened in terms of the Ruiz and AJ fight where equilibrium that was just gone for Wilder, and so he couldn't really handle the punches and the bullying from Fury. So we'll see. I mean, with everything the way it is now, I mean, Wilder could change up a little bit, have a little bit better game plan. I would hope he would change things up a little bit, but he's probably not going to be quite honest with you. So let's just say Fury wins that comfortably and moves past Wilder, which is still the most dangerous heavyweight there is out there in terms of one-punch knockout. Certainly the most dangerous. So let's just say he gets past him though, doesn't get knocked out. There isn't this complication with everything. AJ has to fight Pulev. Now, I don't think that AJ is going to have a problem for Pulev. I think Pulev fits really well into the way AJ likes to fight. AJ likes to break guys down. He's not a one-punch knockout guy, but he's a heavy-hitting heavyweight who will just break you down. And I think that he should do fairly well against Pulev. I don't see Pulev being able to beat Joshua. So let's just say they move past, AJ moves past Pulev. So now that's done. So now they've both moved past who they're probably going to fight this fall. So now we're on to 2021. This is where things get a little bit more complicated and it could be a little bit more of a mess. Dillian Whyte is supposed to have his mandatory for the WBC belt. Obviously, unification trumps his mandatory. So Fury could simply just say, you gotta wait, and if the WBC allows it to happen, which I wouldn't see why they wouldn't at this point, they've basically done it for years to Dillian Whyte. I don't see it being much of a problem. In fact, there's even been Bob Arum talked about the idea that maybe the WBC just elevates Tyson Fury to the franchise champion, kind of like they did with Lomachenko and Canelo. They just elevate him to franchise champion and then just give the regular WBC belt to Dillian Whyte, which I hate that idea, and I absolutely despise the fact that they've made the franchise champion this whole thing for the WBC belt, because it just makes things that much more complicated, and they just kind of pick people at will and then just hand belts to other people. And yeah, I just really don't like the fact that they do that, but it would make things a lot easier because then Dillian Whyte gets the WBC belt, or maybe has to fight for it in a mandatory fight, you know, and then it makes things really simple. Tyson Fury is the franchise champion for the WBC belt. Now he can fight AJ and they don't have to worry about Dillian Whyte. But there's one more side to this whole thing, and that is Alexander Usyk, who's also a mandatory for Joshua now. He's saying that he's going to drag his feet and not allow the Tyson Fury or AJ fight to happen because he's going to try to make his fight with Joshua happen first. And I don't think that's going to happen. I really think that AJ, if he absolutely has to, will just drop the belt. I don't really see why he would lose out on all this money that he could be making. You know, I get it. It's the WBO, and it'd be nice to have another belt involved in this whole situation. But quite frankly, I don't think that AJ or Fury are gonna give up the possible ramifications of the amount of money they're gonna make from this 2-fight deal just to have one added belt on top of it. I think the fact that Tyson Fury is plenty happy being the lineal champion, Ring Magazine champion, and maybe some form of the WBC. Joshua's basically got all the other belts, maybe one excluded because of this whole Usyk thing. If it does happen, it's fine. I mean, you basically have all the belts involved, all the major ones anyways. You know, the WBO, that would be nice to have, but probably whoever ends up winning the AJ Fury, you know, 2-fight deal, whoever ends up winning that will probably end up fighting Usyk anyways. I mean, Usyk's not going anywhere anytime soon, so you might as well. So anyways, that's basically what we've got for heavyweights and for this week. There hasn't been a ton of, you know, news this week. It's been kind of a little bit boring in terms of, you know, big fights being made or big deals being done other than the AJ and Fury deal. So with that said, I wanted to quickly say that I've noticed that there's been some new people coming to the channel, kind of commenting, being part of the conversation. I love it. A lot of enthusiasm for the fights that look like they're going to be happening this summer. So thank you guys for coming by. Thanks for stopping by, commenting, being part of the channel. Really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to like this video and subscribe. And with that said, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.